Okay, today I'm here with Conor Nestor. Conor is, of course, formerly from Foynes in West Limerick, and now he is the manager of Svay Rieng in FC over in Cambodia. Conor, how are you?
Good, Damien. Good to see you.
And you too, man. You too. Conor, you were, of course, I suppose we go back to your early days. You went to school in obviously Foynes, and you went on to Skeeton, and then you headed to Maynooth.
Yeah. Well, I suppose everything happened by accident. My older sisters and brother said that I came into the world by accident, and I continued in that vein, I think. So I went to Maynooth. I was hoping to go to Mary I, but maybe I was focusing too much on the football, and I ended up going to Maynooth to be an English and history teacher. At that point, I'd started coaching. I was coaching for about 2 years already. But it wasn't necessarily, I didn't think it was going to be my career, and there was no industry in Ireland really at all to speak of. So I wasn't thinking down those lines at all. So I went to be an English and history teacher, and I haven't used the degree yet, and hopefully I'll never have to,
Brilliant. And of course, from your time in Maynooth, then you were caretaker manager there at one point, and you were the youngest ever manager in the prestigious Collywood Cup competition, which of course is the southern schools against the northern schools, secondary or third level school level competition.
Yeah. So when I went to college, I played in first year in the Harding Cup, and then I played for 2 years in the Collingwood Cup, which is and in my final year, basically, the committee sacked the gaffer, if you like. They put me in position as a kind of player. Cooper Donnelly, and he came along while I coached the team against UCD, and he was really impressed with what he saw that day. And then he took us over and actually took us to the Collingwood, which I was grateful for because it meant I could keep playing. And also he was far more experienced than I was at that stage. I was only 21, and he took us on to another level. But my teammates would have laughed like that. We made a big impression because the first thing I did was drop myself, and when they made me the boss, So they reckon that was what attracted Cooper to us. And by the time I graduated, then I was kind of working towards my UFAB license, and about a year after graduating, I found myself in the US coaching full time for a company over there. So I kind of fell into it. It was a labor of love really, or two loves really, to be honest with you. There was the love of football itself, and then when you start kind of coaching stuff then as well. So I think pretty quickly I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do anything else really, that I had to kind of satisfy the addiction, So I headed off to the States when I was 22, 23. And then ended up working for the Football Association at home then for close to a decade.
Whoa. As you say, close to a decade with the FAI as a development officer. And I guess anyone that's crossed paths with you, when you were in that role, you were 150% into what you were doing. You were totally invested with whether it was a boy or a girl's school league, you were totally invested in it. You were supportive with the parents, you were supportive with the coaches. You just gave 150%. And I guess my question to you, Conor, is what clicked inside in your head after 10 years doing your dream role, I suppose, as you say? You had your house set up in West Limerick. You had everything going for you, and then bang, you decided to sell the house, walk away from the job, travel.
Yeah. So it's a funny one, Damien. It's a great question. I remember actually being stuck at immigration in Shannon in June 2016 on the way to start my traveling, and they weren't it's mad they're not letting you into America at the time. You're actually still in Shannon, you know, the pre-emigration, if you like, and they were asking the normal questions, you know, and they said, "You don't have a job, you left your job." I goes, "That's right." And you sold your house. That's right. And you want to come into America? It was kind of like they were asking me, did I have a midlife crisis or something? You know, they were saying this fella's on the run or something. No, I suppose what you said at the beginning, I was 150% into it. That I mentioned the two loves, and I suppose that job was three loves in terms of like you'd football, you'd coaching, and then it was you're working for your national association. So there's that, you know, pride that you have in your own country, and then you're doing it in your own neck of the woods as well. So there was just that kind of, there was probably too many. It was probably too personal to me, to be honest. And I remember going to a very good friend of mine's wedding in Boracay, not a million miles from where I am now in the Philippines, and I had probably 2 weeks to myself to think for a while, and I just kind of said, look, you could be 70 or 80 doing this job and you wouldn't feel like you'd done enough, you know, and that was probably the eureka moment in terms of like, I always evaluated at the end of every year, and I always felt like you've not done enough, not enough has changed, you haven't influenced enough people, etc., etc. And then the penny dropped like that. I was never really going to get to that moment, you know. When I went traveling, really, I was seeking kind of a work-life balance, but I've learned now since I've taken up this role that my work is my work-life balance. Do you know what I mean? In terms of that, I'm one of those fortunate people that doesn't feel like I'm at work when I'm at work, you know. So,
but it makes it a lot easier to get up in the morning when you don't have to struggle to get out of bed, when you enjoy going to work, and it's something that you've always dreamed of doing. I suppose coaching at a higher level was always something on your radar anyway, I think, was it?
It's a funny one. I think when I was in Minute, like the time period you mentioned, when kind of my peers kind of said, "Conor, will you take over the team?" That was probably a moment in my life when I was thinking I'd like to be a head coach of a professional football team. And then what happened after that was I got involved in I got lost, if you like, in trying to learn the craft of actually being a coach. And I forgot a little bit about becoming a head coach. And I think around 2015, I got my A license. I was an assistant coach to Tommy Barrett, and I had absolutely zero ambition of being a head coach, because I felt, certainly working for Tommy, he was an ex-pro, really good man manager, also brilliant as an assistant to him in terms of he didn't try to curtail you in any way. Kind of, he left you do what you were good at. He didn't feel threatened by you doing maybe a lot on the field or stuff like that. So Tommy was kind of like perfect for me, and he had so many strengths in areas where I wasn't strong. So I kind of enjoyed that so much that I remember thinking at that time, geez, I remember when I wanted to be a head coach, you know, and actually had no real desire, you know. But that's because I got lost trying to learn how to become a better coach, kind of, and I was more kind of invested in the process, if that makes sense, than you know, being a particular figure or being the boss type thing. And I worked with so many good people, like both professionally and from a voluntary sense. Like all the volunteers, you were one of them that I worked with down through the years. You worked with so many good people that, you just kind of got lost in that work, and it didn't kind of matter if you were the head coach or you were assisting someone. But when I made the decision to leave, really what I was looking for was to be working with players every day. Because I just had that feeling that I wanted to evaluate where I was kind of in my own personal development as a football coach. And I felt that in Ireland, when you don't work with the players frequently, unless you're, you know, working with a full-time team, which is only about 8 teams in the whole country. So opportunity is very, very limited. So I remember saying to a friend, like, I don't care if I end up in Guam, so long as I'm working with the players every day.
What people don't realise, Conor, is as well, like, that the role that you had, like, you were dealing with hundreds and hundreds of kids every year, like hundreds of players every year. And I mean, as
Yeah.
you said there, like, you hit the nail on the head. Like, if you could work with a set 25 or 30 players on a constant basis, and you'd see how long you'd bring them on, or how far you could develop your own skills managing them.
Yeah, and like, it's not a case of one's better than the other. It was just, that's what my heart desired at that particular time. I remember saying on coaching courses that I would have been delivering if there was 20 coaches in the room. I remember saying that, like, if everyone created a good learning environment for the weekend, that we were affecting about 400 players. And I really bought into that, and I bought into that when I was a development officer of the clubs that wanted my help and that wanted to kind of restructure themselves and kind of have long-term plans. I remember going to those clubs and thinking, if you do a good job, you're affecting dozens and dozens of kids, or dozens and dozens of volunteers and future generations as well. So that's probably why I did it for so long, that I saw the value in it. But then I don't know, maybe it's ego, or maybe it's just something that was in me. I probably had reached saturation point, I guess, and wanted to change course a little bit.
You mentioned you mentioned some players, like some of the high profile players you've dealt with, of course. Anthony Ford and Paddy O'Connor are two that springs to mind that are playing over in England. I mean, it must be very self-gratifying for yourself to see those kind of players go through your hands and move on to the very top level.
Well, I think the gratifying thing is that, like, both those players' journeys very different in some respects, and then there are similarities there as well. But both of those young lads would tell you themselves they had a fantastic support network, their own families, number one, their clubs as well, that their clubs had a great support system around them. They went to different clubs at different stages, but for Anthony, you know, that was predominantly Ballingarry, and for Paddy, you know, growing up, like, it was Bresca, and then Limerick FC would have played a big role as well in his development. But like, the gratification for me in the numbers of players that ended up going over to England and was that I felt the whole region was heading in a direction together. Maybe not every club and not every coach, but if you looked at, just went to any field in West Limerick or Limerick City or any part of the county now, when there's games happening, and you'll see a little bit of coaching, and you'll see maybe a little bit more of a child-centered approach. And like, that's markedly different from the environment I would have grown up in. So that's kind of, and I think so many people were involved in that. And that's what's helped the likes of Anthony and Paddy. I mean, ultimately they got where they got because they put the work in, and they got themselves there. But it's that environment that's around you is either going to make it more difficult or make it easier. And I think it was a little bit easier for their generation because they got access to a little bit more coaching, and they were allowed to maybe play and express themselves maybe a little bit more, you know.
Of course, yeah, of course. And of course, I suppose, were you surprised or could you have foretold what happened? What was going to happen within the FAI years after you left?
No, it was.
Yeah.
I suppose it's this time last year when the stories started breaking, and it was heartbreaking, to be honest, when the stories were breaking, because when you're working in an organization and you commit yourself to it, you know, when something like that tars the association, everyone's getting tarred with the same brush a little bit, and yeah, it was heartbreaking a little bit because you would have been associated as kind of being an FAI man, and that meant one thing to me, but I suppose to a lot of other people it would have meant something different. And then of course I felt for my colleagues who who are still there and trying to work under those conditions and still are to this day. So, but look, I think good things will come from it, and some of those steps look like they've been taken already. But yeah, it's certainly this last 12 months. It hasn't been a good time for Irish football. There's no way you can dress it up, you know. But hopefully, like, we've got a senior manager now that's a product of kind of the Irish coach education system. He's a product of the League of Ireland. And I think the whole country are going to get behind what he's going to try and create with the senior team. And as always, the kind of senior men's team, rightly or wrongly, is kind of the front porch of the association. And when things are going well there, everything else is kind of painted a little bit better, and maybe everything else kind of goes along with that. And there's pros and cons to that, but I think you can get a lot more done when things are going right with the senior men's international team, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely true, I suppose. You never held it a secret, Conor, or anyone that checked your Facebook or anything like that, how much admiration you had for your dad. He was a big part in molding you to who you are today.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I like about 1 in 3 people in Ireland. I'm affected by cancer. You know that I would have lost my dad when I was 21, but the way I look at it really is like the relationship I had with him in the first 21 years of my life would have probably set me up for life, really, in terms of and of course my mother equally so, in terms of I read somewhere once you should coach like a parent and parent like a coach. And I think a lot of people would read that quote and probably not understand what it really means. And I'm fortunate in that I really know what that quote means, you know. And like working out here in Cambodia and working in different communities in Limerick when I did, not everyone's given that opportunity in life, you know. So while there's obviously a tinge of sadness there, and you'd love to share kind of some of the moments I've had in the last 12 months with him, the overriding feeling kind of is like how well he set me up for the life that I'm living now, like, you know.
Exactly, and some people will probably say he's watching over you, and he's probably guided you along some of your career, your choice paths along the way today too.
I tell you, my first season here, I would have said, Jesus, he's trying to get me out of here. But I think last year there was definitely some days when I was thinking, geez, he might have steered the course for me there a little bit, yeah.
Well, going back to your own story, then, Con, you left, you headed to America. What was the plan going to America for you, or was there a plan once you got out of that little American box in Shannon?
Yeah, there wasn't in terms of, I had a network in America already, having worked there in the past, and I suppose the American infrastructure for sport is the polar opposite to the Irish one, in terms of, in Ireland you don't really pay for anything when it comes to sport, and that has its pros and it has its cons. And in America you pay for everything, and that has its pros and its cons. But one of the pros of it is that, like, you have, for example, directors of football in a regular grassroots club, and that director of football would be full-time employed for making sure that those kids that came into that club got the best possible development as a child, and B, an athlete. So that's probably what I was gearing towards, was going to work for an organization that I could believe in, and that I could kind of dedicate myself to a smaller group of people and try and have a bigger influence over that smaller group's lives, basically. So that's what I thought. And I went on like a 70-day road trip, caught up with some old friends, caught up with some new friends, and networked. And I had a few offers, but nothing really that grabbed me. And I came home then in Ireland for a while, spent some time with yourself and a few other people around Limerick. And eventually I kind of lay my hat in Melbourne, where an old friend of mine, Keith Garvey, who I kind of gave him his coaching opportunity here in Ireland, and then he moved down to Melbourne and set up a coaching business. And I kind of was living in Melbourne for 5-6 months, and he said, "Look, do you want to do this properly?" And he went to sponsor me to live there for 2 years. And to be honest with you, I fell in love with Melbourne, with the city, the lifestyle. I probably had figured out work-life balance when I was in Melbourne. And working with Keith was something that I was attracted to, but maybe not the role itself. It was probably more about Melbourne and more about kind of working with someone that sees things in a similar way to myself. So while that sponsorship was while we were waiting for it, if you like, I came here to Phnom Penh, and then I as I tended to do, I fell into something by accident again, and that was this job. I was working in international schools during the day, and I coached a semi-pro team at night. And after 3 months here, before the visa came, I got offered basically a job with a top 5 team here I got offered basically a job with a top 5 team here in the pro league here. And I can't
imagine it took much time or thinking about on your behalf to take that opportunity. I mean, this is kind of what you were gearing yourself towards to take on. It didn't matter, as you said, where you were playing, as long as you were coaching a semi-pro or a pro team.
Yeah, no, look, I couldn't believe it really when it happened in a way, and it happened so fast. And a loss like Cambodia is very different to Ireland in many different respects. But football here, or soccer, whatever you want to call it, it's in people's hearts and minds. And I couldn't help when I was, driving down the street or whatever, kind of seeing the Ireland I grew up in, that kind of late 80s, early 90s Ireland. You could just see a little bit of it. And I could kind of see maybe how football might be able to influence society here a little bit. And then I believed in the players that I'd seen. I believed that there was qualities here, and they could have offered me pennies, and I would have stayed. And to be honest, they didn't offer me much more than pennies. But yeah, no, there was no saying no really. I was caught at that stage,
So you're in Cambodia. You're not. I assume you weren't that familiar with the language at the time.
No.
And there you are from West Limerick, and you're trying to organise a squad for your first season.
Yeah, and can you think of a worse idea than getting a Cork man to translate for you? So that's what I did. Conor Wall is his name. He's a Cork man. He's been here for about 14 years. Nicest guy you'll ever meet. And when he first got here, he was living with a Khmer family, a Cambodian family, and when their little daughter was learning to speak, read, and write, he kind of learned alongside her. So he speaks as like a local does, and understands, and he's a sports fanatic. So I took him with me, and for the first year here, we had like Murphy's Law. My first year was an absolute nightmare. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. We had an injury crisis when we came in. We had no foreigners recruited. 7 games in, we had a riot. Literally, I thought I was in some kind of elaborate Monty Python sketch or something, It was,
about that game,
ridiculous.
actually. That was your 7th game in the first season. You got heavily penalised. You lost a lot of players after that as well. What happened that day on the pitch?
So, if you'd asked me a day later, I'd probably tell you a different story. But now, kind of looking back on it, what happened was we weren't able to put our best team on the pitch at any stage, and the players, the senior players and the experienced players, could see what I was trying to do with them, and I think they believed it was going to work and it was going to make a real difference in their careers. But we weren't getting the results. We won 2, drew 2, lost 2, and in this game, basically, it was 1-1, and things were just starting to click. They were just playing the way I wanted them to play. There was 15 minutes left in the game. it was like if you watched a boxing fight where the other boxer's legs are about to go. You know, that's what was happening in the game, and the lights in the stadium went out,
Oh,
uh,
Jesus.
and our opponent, whose legs were about to go, got 15 minutes rest. And when we started strong again, and a striker that I had 5 weeks to recruit foreigners, and my first ever head coach job. Like, how do you recruit foreigners when you live in Cambodia? Like, so you had to learn pretty quick. And one of the guys I recruited, he went clean through on goals, and he wasn't really adapting. He's a good lad and a talented player, but he wasn't adapting to Cambodia, and maybe some of the players were frustrated with him. And he went clean through on goals, and he missed an open goal, and they went straight down the other end and scored a deflected goal. And it was kind of our season. The lights going out, miss an open goal, conceded a deflected goal. It was kind of like in a snapshot there. That was our season. That's just the way it was going, you know. And what happened basically is there was some handbags on the field. Nothing really. 2 yellow cards would have been dished out, and it would have been all over. And it's just the players' frustration kind of boiled over, because I suppose like at the time I thought, like, you know, am I the problem? And I remember going to the senior staff and saying, am I the problem? I'll remove myself. Or I remember going to the CEO, telling him the same. And that's actually what I thought. I thought that they weren't able to do what I was asking them to do. But in hindsight, looking back, it was actually they thought I was going to get sacked, and it was the pressure of that. Our kit man went onto the field because there was a foreign player fighting with one of our players. That foreign player turned around, punched our kit man. So it was like all hell broke loose. Like, the stand emptied, and a week later we had 7 bans, and 5 of those were half-season bans with a little bit more than, with only 3 games more than a half season left, you know. So
Jesus, it was like a junior B hurling match on a Sunday morning here in Ireland.
it was a lot worse, I can tell you, a lot worse. I've never seen anything like it. I was stuck. I was in my technical area. You know me, I'm probably not great at staying in my technical area at the best of times. And I was stuck to my technical area. Like, I was literally like waiting for Mike Murphy to come and can the camera or something. And I couldn't believe it.
Something like that, as you said, like, really must get into your head and say, Jesus, am I the right man for the job? Should I be here at all? Like, but moving on from that, you finished that season and you started strong the following season. You had a good pre-season. You had your homework done on and off the pitch. You got your transfer of players, the right balance you needed, and season 2 kicks off.
Yeah, it's funny actually. You mentioned my time in the FAI about being like 100%, 150% in or whatever. But my biggest weakness, and something that I probably reviewed and was self-critical about when I was traveling, was I never managed up in the FAI. And maybe I'm thankful for that now. Maybe I would have climbed the ladder and would have got into some trouble. But I never managed up. I was more concerned about, the way I looked at it, I was more concerned about the people that I was serving than serving the bosses, if you like.
Yes.
But I did a course when I was in Atlanta on my travels, and one of the tutors was talking about managing up, and it was like a slap in the face, like, because he said, if you really care about the people you're trying to affect the ones above you, because they're the ones with the power. And it was like he'd taken off his shoe and slapped me across the face, like, in terms of, it makes just complete sense, you know. And not managing up is selfish, really, is the way I'd look at it now. So I managed up before they even gave me the job here, in terms of, I knew the CEO was a numbers man, and I explained a lot about football analytics to him, which I won't go into. It's very boring. But it's basically, I explained ways that he could see if the team was progressing or not outside of the actual result. Because the result, injuries will dictate, the time it takes to get your ideas across will dictate, suspensions, of which we had many, will dictate. But there's certain like key performance indicators that you can look at that over like the full length of time, they kind of ring true, and you can use them as guides. So the reason I didn't get sacked, if you like, during that season from hell, was because those key performance indicators were actually and we were doing well on them. And you know, it's not a case when you tell somebody this before a ball's kicked, you know, you can't like fool them about it. You know what I mean? Because they may not have been good. You know. So he bought into that a little bit, and we won our final 3 games of the season when all the band boys came back. And to be honest, the CEO stuck his neck out because there would have been pressure from the supporters. There would have been pressure from, you know, certain people within the club, understandably so. And like you said, I used that period in the off season to really get the recruitment right, to show the door to some people, unfortunately, that had to be shown the door. And then, we just got to work. And to be honest, a lot of the hard work was actually done already. You've probably seen it, like when a coach comes in somewhere, that the players, you get them thinking first, but they're not doing it yet. And sometimes when you get them thinking, they're actually worse. And then it's when they don't have to think, understand, and they're just doing, you know, what the plan is. That's when they kick on to another level. And I think like most of my good work was done in the first season, but the rewards came like in the second, you know.
And of course, in the second season, you had a fantastic run of was it 33 consecutive wins?
Yeah, it was 33 without a loss. So it was the 3 games in the season that had finished, and then we won 30 games without a loss in the new season, and that took us right up to the last 2 games of the year. So one was the final game of the season in the league, and the other one was cup final. So we were, you know, 180 minutes away from a double win and invincible season, but you know, we didn't get over the line. We won the league, which was the first time that the club has topped the league. They won the league in 2013 through a playoff system. But this was it was the first time they topped the league, because generally we're about number five on the budget scale. And when you look at professional sport, you normally finish where your budget is.
Okay.
But
so you were boxing well above your weight.
Yeah, and like we're into season 3 now before COVID came and touched the shores, if you like, and we're giant top at the moment. So we're still kind of boxing above our weight, because we're probably number 4 now in terms of budget. But it's very early days, you know. So
of course, yeah. Before we talk about lifting the trophy in the season 2, you're known to the locals over there as Angry Nestor. The media see. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Did that shock people at home when they heard it, or did they just have a nod of appreciation?
Well, when I read it, when I read it in the paper, I thought it was the wrong person they were talking about. I said it's definitely a misjudging the character, definitely.
I don't know. Is that a joke? Yeah, no. So where that came from, it's funny actually. And look, you learn from everything. Actually, my second game in charge, the players were playing the old way, if you like. I wanted them to play through the opposition and not in front of the opposition. And in my second game, they were playing in front of the opposition. And I wasn't angry because we drew that game, but and it wasn't about results. It was more about like, I felt I'd got the message through in terms of, I don't care if you make mistakes, work hard and try and do what I'm asking you, and I'll put you in the team every week. And I was probably just going a bit nuts on the touchline, and the camera picked up me. I think I might have like smacked the dugout or something pretty juvenile anyway. The commentator said in Cambodian basically, Angry Nestor, you know. So the name kind of stuck a little bit, and it's a good friend of mine said if you get a name for getting up early in the morning, you can get up anytime you want. And it's a little bit like that now. Like the camera now here, when I'm watching games back, it only pans to me when I look unhappy because now I've got the name, and I suppose they're feeding to that a little bit, you know. But
they're expecting you to burst out every second.
Yeah, and like, to be honest with you, it's a weakness, you know, in terms of like that. When you're winning and stuff like that, I need to enjoy the moments a lot more than I do, you know. But it's difficult here because of the language barrier. If we've just scored a goal, for example, I'm normally screaming and shouting because if the message is a little bit more complex, I might have to get that translated. So the camera will pan, and because you're screaming, you look angry, but you're screaming because they can't hear you because there's noise.
But of course, everyone knows that you're at your weakest after you score a goal. You know, your team is at the weakest when you score a goal. So
yeah, you know, and that's it. You know, that's I suppose that from my position, I don't have the luxury, if you like, of celebrating a goal. Like, you know, there's been a few that we've celebrated, I think, but mainly I'm thinking about what's next, you know, and I suppose that's my job, like, you know.
Getting back to the last few weeks of season 2, then, Con, your heart must be filled with pride to see your sister and your mum in the stadium that day. Yeah,
well, the first thing I have to say is they cursed us. So they were there. They were there for the last game of the season, and it was our first loss. And the same day, we had a penalty ruled out. That was a penalty, and we had 2 penalties. Sorry, we had 2 penalty shouts, and like, you'd say, geez, we'll definitely get one of them. We got none of them. And they got a penalty that wasn't a penalty, and we lost 2-1. Now, we played horribly, I have to say. So it wasn't just the referee's fault. But yeah, look, my mother's 75, and we were talking a little bit before we started the interview, and like, I probably got like a lot of my personality maybe from my dad, I think. But like, work rate, if I got about 50% of my mother's, like, I'll be all right probably for the rest of my career. And 75, she hops on multiple planes and comes to Cambodia. Like, you know, I know 25-year-olds that wouldn't have the bravery to do it, you know. So it was fantastic. I brought her into the dressing room that day, and the captain handed her over my league winners medal, because I suppose when I was about 20, 21, and at that stage I was explaining to my parents that I wanted to be a football coach, and sure, they didn't know anyone they knew that was working in professional sport, like, you know. So it's kind of like coming in and saying that you're going to be a Hollywood actor to a degree, in terms of it's not a very tangible thing, or it's a hard thing, certainly for my parents kind of and their generation to understand, I think.
Of course, yeah.
But you know, to say I was probably terrified at that time. You know, it looked like I was probably going to drop out of college at the time, I think. And they just backed me to the hilt, like, you know. So you know, I think if you look at every story of someone winning leagues forever, like, you know, you definitely don't do it on your own. Certainly if you're a coach, you don't, because the players are the ones that win the games. But yeah, that's my mother's medal now. So I was very proud that she was there with my sister and my brother-in-law to receive it, you know.
Of course, yeah. And I suppose in another way, I think it was probably good for your mom to see where you had ended up and your background, and see that you were okay, you know. Because a lot of people, when they hear of Cambodia or whatever, they think third world countries, like, but it's the polar opposite.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that was massive, you know, and I knew that if she did come here, that would be the end result of it, because the people here are fantastic. They've warm hearts. They have a sense of fun. Maybe not the same sense of fun as the Irish, a different type of sense of fun, but definitely a sense of fun, and a real warmth, like I said, and it's a great place to live. So yeah, she was a bit more happy in herself, I think, for sure, on the way back from that. And as well, like she's our number one supporter. She watches all our games on Facebook. You can watch them on Facebook Live, and it's, you know, during this period now, like especially when she's locked indoors, I suppose, like the whole rest of the country, she's really missing the games, like which is great. Like, you know, it's great that for a lot of people living away from home or whatever, they don't have that kind of thing that can bring you together still while you're separated by miles, you know.
Of course.
It is nice to have that kind of that thing that brings you, and that's sport at the end of the day, isn't it? It brings people together. That's its power, you know. So
Exactly.
it's great.
You're lifting the trophy for the club. You're an Irishman managing a Cambodian club, and you just have to win in the league. You're handing that trophy over to your CEO. What was the conversation?
I was like, there was no conversation really. It was just a look. You know, in terms of he backed me. He stuck his neck out for me, like, and probably 12 months before, everyone was probably calling him the stupidest man in Cambodia, you know. And 12 months later, he looked like a genius, you know. So I didn't say too much to him. I just, you know, it's nice, like, when you can look at someone you respect, and I really respect him, and just kind of, you know, you've done your job, you know. But like, you know me, you've worked with me. Like, we lost the cup final, and we lost the opportunity to kind of be invincible. And that's probably when I went home in late November, early December, for a very short period. That was, I had a little bit of time to think to myself, and that's all I was thinking about, really, to be honest. But yeah, when we lifted the trophy and I had the tricolour there was a friend of mine from home happened to be there on the day, and another friend of mine from home who lives in Australia came for the cup final. Yeah, we had the tricolour wrapped around the league title. It was a nice moment for sure, and it was nice, kind of, for those that back you, like, to deliver for them, I guess, you know.
Brilliant. So what's next here? I mean, you're there for the foreseeable future anyway, as long as you're late. Is Cambodia your second home, Conor? Have you a plan?
Yeah, like, I think when you work in football, I could say you work in any line of work nowadays, and in some ways you need to have multiple plans. And like, my strength, if you like, is what you mentioned on the outset, which is, when my heart's in something, you get all of it. But my weakness is probably when if my heart's not in it, then that's it. I'll bolt pretty quickly, like, because I just don't know how to operate that way. And so my strength is my weakness, I guess. And I'm working now on building a football club, not just building a football team. So we're trying to develop the academy. We're trying to build onto the stadium. We're trying to create a training ground. We're trying to make the club more viable, that it's not just the owner that's putting his hand in his pocket all the time. So I'm really, for as long as kind of, I feel like I'm working with people whose vision is the same as mine, and whose willingness to kind of do the work is somewhere alongside mine, then I prefer to stay and build something than you know, than to jump ship. And you know, when you're in this game, like, you can get fired at any time. So a lot of people, they monetize when things are going well, and they'll jump ship, and they'll take the big payday somewhere else. But the reality is, like, I'm responsible for 50 families, because there's 50 people in the organization, and they're all working incredibly hard. So I feel a duty of care to keep building while the owner is allowing me to keep building, you know. So yeah, I'm very happy here, kind of on and off the pitch. And you know me, kind of, if I'm able to invest myself in my work, then kind of everything else is good anyway, you know what I mean? So when you choose this path, when you're losing, everything's terrible, and when you're winning, everything's great.
Yeah, there's no grey area. It's either black or white.
Yeah, it is like, but at the same time, I'm probably more motivated by the human side in terms of, you know, half of our squad have had two new contracts since I've been here. We're working on when they retire, what their careers are going to look like. So that's, you know, I'd never get bored of football. I'm addicted to football, but when you're running on empty, if you like, that's probably, they're the drivers in terms of, you look at some of these guys, and when they were kids, they were picking up rubbish on the side of the street to collect a few dollars to feed themselves and their families, you know. And now they're fathers themselves, and their own kids are living quite comfortably, you know. So so that's a massive motivating factor, and I feel really, really privileged, like to kind of be in the driving seat a little bit for driving how that's going to look here for I think the foreseeable future. I hope the foreseeable future, but you never know in football, you know.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Before we finish up, Conor, you mentioned earlier on about COVID. What way is it affecting you guys over there?
So as a nation, there's been no deaths, I suppose, is the first thing. There was a little bit over, I think, 122 cases. There's only 2 cases now because we had X amount of recoveries. Everything has been kind of closed down. We've been aware of it since early January. So we were traveling to different countries because we are playing in the Asian equivalent of the Europa League at the moment. And so when we were traveling, we had masks on and we were sanitizing our hands, and we were aware of the threat, you know. But things probably only closed down here around the same time they did in Ireland. And we're not on complete shutdown, but you go into, like, I'm in a cafe at the moment, and it has like social distancing procedures in place, and your temperature will get checked on the way in, your hands will be sanitized. People that don't arrive together will be separated from each other, you know.
Okay.
So I think, strictly speaking, we're probably ready to go back. But I think the government here are a little bit maybe unwilling to be the first ones to go back. Maybe they're waiting for some of the bigger countries around them to go back first. Just in terms of maybe they don't want there to be a mistrust there in terms of people thinking that there is problems in Cambodia with COVID-19 and that the government has suppressed it. But I really don't think that's the case, you know. Sometimes we have to take the players in and out of hospitals, and just you know, everything's kind of operating as normal. So we're really lucky in that regard. But football has closed down, obviously, and we're kind of waiting for the government to lift the ban. And when the government lift the ban, I think we'll get 30 days to prepare, if you like. We've been training away in small groups and stuff like that. It's not quite the same, but physically, like, the players are okay. They're in decent nick. They're just probably, like most people, mentally they're missing their daily routine and their lifestyle. Like, you know.
Of course. Well, listen, Conor, it's been a fantastic story, and it was great to hear it. Coming from West Limerick, halfway across the world, and ending up winning the Cambodian title, and going on, as you said, to play in the Europa equivalent league as well over there. It's fantastic. And I wish you and all your crew and your new family over there, I hope you're safe and well, Conor, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Yeah, and many, many happy returns to you and your family and all my friends in West Limerick, Damien. It's been my pleasure.
Brilliant. Listen, Conor, thanks a million. Stay safe out there.
Take care. Bye-bye.